Right now, it is time for the Frick and Frack of Nick and Knack. Tim, Luke, and Greg Strom, the appraisal guys. You can find them on the web at tqag.com, but right here on a Tuesday morning on Robin Hood Radio. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Can't complain. You know what? It starts out in the 30s and then gets up to about 65, and somehow you just appreciate the 65 more.
I was listening to Bird Note because you have us on hold while Bird Note is on, and this was a very interesting one this morning. I had no idea that pigeons' eyes were fixed on, they couldn't move around.
I know. It's funny. I used to be when I used to golf a lot. I had a friend that used to call me his pigeon. That means he could beat me anytime he wanted. So if he hadn't won in a while, he'd call me up and say, "Pigeon, come on, let's go out." So there's a lot about pigeons I don't understand. They don't get much respect anymore nowadays. Kind of like crows. There's something that we never talk about, and I wanted to bring it up to you because I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather was in World War I, and he used to have his helmet, his uniform. There were also his canteens and stuff like that. And as a kid, I was always fascinated with that. I used to fill up his canteen and put it in the refrigerator, and that thing would stay cold when you took it out in the summertime. So I started thinking the other day, we don't talk much about military items and auctions, and I don't know if because nowadays with guns and everything like that, are there auctions where very old military items come up for auction, and do people collect them?
Absolutely. Uniforms, medals, paraphernalia. You were talking about canteens. They come up. There are sales that I don't know if. I'm sure they probably have complete military sales. But most of the items that are uniforms and things like that, when they do come up for sale, it's pretty regular. I mean, they and also Civil War things. Civil War canteens, Civil War uniforms are really big. So yes, there are complete sales of just military memorabilia, as it were.
Yeah, I know Civil War is really big, and Ed Kirby, just a ledger on here, just passed away. Really writes about the history, has written about the history of our area, not only in terms of its geology, but of course of its previous inhabitants, and how important this area was. So I just found it interesting that you don't hear many stories. When you hear about old war, you hear about them finding a bomb someplace in Europe or someplace like that. You don't really get into the other things that come with auctions. But I know, especially Civil War reenactments, those folks must attend things like that as well. Now, also, what came to my mind when I always try to think about something I can lead you guys down the rabbit hole on. And another one is, we have organizations in this country that follow the general economy, the ups and downs, housing, automobile, retail. Is there one group or two groups that takes the entire auction industry, follows it for a year, and then at the end of that year releases different reports on what was hot, what was not, comparing it to previous years, and looking ahead to the future?
Tim?
Yeah.
I know there are, but you deal with that a lot more than I do.
Yeah, so before I answer that, I also just wanted to let you know about the military items. I just went on liveauctioneers.com, and currently there are over 2,500 items that fall under military and war memorabilia that are going up, and it's just a variety from helmets to posters to ephemera to all that. So to answer that question, yes, there is a lot that goes on. And for the current question is, there are a number of different markets that are both analyzed and looked at by different firms, especially when it comes to artwork, automobiles, various other things. It's really hard because there's so much that is being offered at auction that it's not just one area. So one group will look at the artwork, for example, and let's say here's what was sold for great amounts of money. It does get tracked. Forbes will come out with something. This is usually the time that they look back. I mean, they try to do articles January, February. They're putting it together because all of the December results are coming in, and then they have to process everything. But it usually comes out toward the beginning of this year, and the early part of the year when they look back on what were the trends, what were the markets. And for the art world, one of the big things was that, yes, there was a slight decrease, I think, from 2019 and 2020. 2020, I think there was, from what I remember reading, like a 22% decrease of the really expensive art and things like that. And you have to be able to read into what those percentages mean. And I think a lot of people, some people had to sell things, but others, they were a little hesitant of putting something that was very valuable out into the marketplace in an untested online marketplace during a pandemic. Is it going to sell? And overwhelmingly, what we found as 2020 progressed is that, yes, things are selling. And a number of our auctioneer friends have posted the best year in 2020 because they had a choice. And their choice was to either dig in, put things online, sell them, and keep moving, or hold back and wait and see what happens. And the ones that held back and waited or laid people off, they have lost a little bit of market share where others have jumped in. And I'll give you an example of that. Is I had a conversation with Darren Julian just a week ago, and I was asking him how are things going and what's happening, and he said, yeah, the pandemic was, it hit us, but we made a decision, a very conscious decision, to really ramp up and push forward, because what he was seeing is that some of the other auction houses were laying people off or putting them on furlough, and there were less people to deal with that stuff. So they ramped up and they were able to get more market share, but also more items that they were able to sell. And that really helped feed their auction for this year, for 2021. They have a bunch of things already lined up into 2022. So yeah, there are people that track it. There are people that watch that. There are reports that come out, and as appraisers and also as auctioneers, it's just something to look at, because it does give you a good sense of where the market is, what's going on, and where you should be focusing your attention.
Well, you can also find them in places like, I know that Forbes, usually at least once a year, there's always something in Forbes that they put out about, especially if, let's say a painting sells for an astronomical amount. Well, someone at Forbes will put out a trend in what's happening in the art. Also, some of the auction sites themselves, for example, like Ask Art or any of the art auction houses that sell online, they also every year put out, sometimes multiple times during the year, trends in different collecting fields, because they do get very specific. For example, there was not so long ago, there was when we were talking about, I forget which card it was, Tim, that sold for a baseball card, but there was an article about trends in sports cards. So whenever there is a hubbub about some piece of memorabilia collecting or art, usually money magazines or auction magazines, you can also get collecting trends. Christie Sotheby's writes about them. So I mean, they might not, they might not be right in front of our eyes, but they are there if you're in the industry, and you can just you can find them relatively easily. And the good thing is they are usually relatively current now because of the internet. So it's a trend.
Yeah. Well, and if you Google that, like I just put in just something to see what comes up on Google, and here's some articles: what's hot, what's not, the 2020 edition antiques and auction news. So goes into that. Antique Trader has see which collectible markets are thriving, and that's from 2018. So
here's one
that there's. Go ahead.
eBay 2021 State of Trader cards spotlight. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and what we're actually seeing is that the sports cards have just rocketed back. I mean, for a long time, those were things that, okay, well, I'm not sure. I mean, the market was good, but there's now a whole interest, and I think that has something to do with the pandemic, is that people were either selling and the great things were coming up, and people were buying because they said, okay, I want to put my money into something. And the both baseball and basketball. I mean, the Michael Jordan rookie card has been selling for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, which, depends on the grade, and it's got to be graded, and it has to have the condition. But even LeBron James and some of these other the people that are still playing, that are rookies, they're really being sought after, and I think they're looking at the longevity of those for the marketplace, and it's just continuing to grow. It's amazing, because in the collectibles area has always been one of those areas that just goes and you never know which turn it's going to make. But when there is a big splash, and this is what Greg was talking about, when something makes a big splash, that's when they start writing these articles and say, oh, look in your attics, look in your basements, see if you have these cards. So those are areas that I think have really picked up in this last year, especially during the pandemic.
Now, my mind gets boggled, so I'm not sure whether we talked about this or not. We probably did. But how does a Chinese antique wind up in New Haven, purchased for $35, turn into an item that fetched $721,000 at the auction? I mean, how many people must have owned that bowl and not known about it?
Most definitely. And what was interesting is that when the article came out prior to it going up for auction, that it was found in a Connecticut yard sale, and they paid $35 for it. The gentleman that purchased it said he just had a feeling, and he recognized some of the markings, but wasn't sure. And there are a lot. Like we've seen it. There's just a lot of them that are not worth $700,000. But it was, when I saw the article, I put it on Facebook, and I tagged our friend Scott Simmons, who writes for Florida Weekly, and he also goes thrift store hunting and looks for things. And he said, oh my goodness, I'm going to take a closer look at some of the bowls that I just picked up and find out like what they are. And that's where you need to have a professional eye take a look at it, somebody who recognizes the markings and also the materials, because the materials are going to be very different when it's that old than something that is not as old, or made to look old but really is more contemporary. So but yeah, Marshall, I would agree that probably changed hands so many times, and it went from being something revered to something that was just there, and it's like, okay, probably doesn't have any value. Let's just move on.
That's exactly. Oh, go ahead, Marshall.
I just say, that sooner, way back when the person who originally owned it knew the value of it, it's obviously a family situation where they just didn't take the time to do exactly what you just said. Hire somebody. It's worth the investment if you got a family and somebody's got an estate and the estate's going. It's worth the money to spend to find out what's involved or what is not involved in the estate.
Correct. we have a perfect story that we use whenever that question comes up, and you hit the nail right on the head there, and that is the family who is left to dispose of the items. They a lot of times, at least here, the heirs come to Florida. They have to go through the house. They're rummaging through closets and garages and storage units. And we did a walkthrough. This was probably maybe 15, 20 years ago. And we went in and we found this vase in a closet. And they said, well, we want to, we're going to put this in a garage sale, and we're going to, if we put $10 on it, is that too much? Well, turns out we sold it for them for $25,000. But, and that happens a lot because of what happens from the original owner who really reveres a particular item and doesn't really say too much about it. And it's passed down, and it's in good condition, and it's lovely, and people just use it to decorate with and to sit around and admire, but not really know much about it. And it's like the old telephone game. By the time it gets down to the 10th person, the story is completely different, and people don't realize the value that's there. And so they think, oh, let's just get rid of it. We just got to get rid of this now. And that's how you end up with a piece of Chinese porcelain that was bought for $35 and ends up selling for $750,000.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because that bowl, it's from, it's from the 15th century, and from the article, it just says that how an example wound up in a Connecticut yard sale is a frustrating mystery, and it says that this particular bowl, it sparked a 4-person bidding war, finally hammering down at $580 before premiums, and the estimate was $380. So then with the premiums, it went to $720. And really, this is only one of 6 known. So one of those once in a lifetime. And that's why whenever we see these, we always say, go and look. If you find another one, that would be great if lightning strikes twice. But it's been our experience that it really doesn't, not in the same location anyway. So, but just imagine its life from the 15th century all the way through to 2021 in a yard sale, and where it had been and the places it's seen and the people that have handled it. And it's pretty amazing.
Well, I think that's what's so remarkable is that it was in virtually pristine condition. And something that old, you wonder, my God, look in your cupboard. How many plates and bowls do you have in your cupboard that you use every day that have chips on them? And they're maybe 2 years old. So
right.
What has this item gone through for 500 years to be in such great condition? So I think that's another reason that people are a little mystified as to what the values of something is, because they're not sure exactly, especially with Asian art. It's very difficult to look at a piece of Asian porcelain if you don't know what you're looking at and say, oh, well, this is from the 16th century, and this is from Tuesday morning, and for $5.95.
Right. You have to be able to tell those characteristics of the piece.
And you can't be afraid to spend the money to have it appraised and valuated properly, especially if you're looking to sell it. So,
but beware, you probably only have $1. It's probably
that's true.
A whole lot.
That's the other thing. That's the other point. If it only is worth $1 and you spend $150 or $200 to have it appraised, well, you still did your due diligence, and you shouldn't feel bad about that, because you have a 50-50 chance of something being worth $1.50 or $150,000.
Well, and that's why lotteries do so well.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, guys. You filled my plate for this morning, so
there we go.
We want you guys to have a good week, and we'll speak to you next week.
Sounds good,
Okay,
Marshall.
have a great week.
Take care, buddy.
Take care, guys. Tim, Luke, and Greg Strom, the appraisal guys, the frick and frack of Nick and Knack. Appraise this. You'll find them at tqag.com on the web.